For decades, one story has been repeated. Prehistoric humans lived short lives, died young, and rarely reached the age of 30. That image appeared in school textbooks, documentaries, and even some early research. But as archaeologists began collecting human skeletal data on a global scale, an entirely different picture emerged. At many archaeological sites, researchers have found spines worn down by long-term arthritis, teeth severely eroded from decades of chewing, and healed fractures, clear signs of long lives, not early deaths. These findings don't belong to just one or two outliers. They appear repeatedly across different cultural layers, spanning from Europe to Africa. In many cases, prehistoric people lived to 60, 70, or even beyond 80 years of age, far from rare occurrences. More importantly, these individuals didn't merely survive, they lived with active support from their communities. Someone with a broken leg couldn't hunt for weeks. Someone who had lost all their teeth couldn't feed themselves. But they didn't die. They lived because someone cooked for them, shared food, and protected them from predators. No hospitals, no doctors, only humans caring for one another. This leads to a powerful hypothesis. Longevity isn't merely a result of medicine or technology. It stems from cooperation, empathy, and social bonding, capacities our ancestors likely possessed very early on. And if that's true, then perhaps the force that kept humanity alive for millions of years wasn't brute strength, but the persistence to care for one another into old age. One of the most misleading numbers in human history is the average lifespan of prehistoric humans was 30 years. It sounds objective, clear, concise, but in truth, it's one of the most misleading statistics when evaluating our ancestors' lives. The problem lies in this. Average lifespan does not reflect the actual lifespan of adults. It is dragged down by one dominant factor: extremely high child mortality. In many ancient communities, 30 to 50% of children died before the age of 5. Not because society was cruel, but due to harsh environmental conditions, infections, diarrhea, dehydration, malaria, injury, without any treatments. Imagine, 10 children are born, 5 die by age 2. The remaining 5 live to 60. The statistical average lifespan, 31 years. But clearly, that's not the real human lifespan. It's a statistical artifact from a population with very high early mortality. Saying prehistoric people only lived to 30 is like saying humans never grow old. To understand our ancestors' true lifespan, speculation is not enough. We need data. And the data has spoken, clearly and undeniably. A large-scale anthropological study examined 12 modern-day hunter-gatherer societies across 4 continents. From the Amazon rainforest, African savannas, Siberian taiga, to Southeast Asian islands. These communities lack electricity, hospitals, and modern technology, but their lifestyle closely mirrors how humans lived for hundreds of thousands of years. The demographic findings shocked many long-standing assumptions. 63% of children survived to age 15. Among those, 68% lived to at least age 45. In other words, once a person survived childhood, most reached middle age, and many lived far beyond. More surprising, the most common age at death wasn't 30 or 40, but 72 years. In a world without antibiotics, vaccines, or early diagnosis, people still lived long, provided they survived early childhood. In fact, the average lifespan after age 45 ranged from 14 to 24 additional years, depending on the group. That means if someone made it to middle age, they could realistically live to 59, 65, or even near 70. Not as an exception, but as a recurring trend. These numbers don't come from modern cities, but from groups still living close to nature, representing the most prehistoric lifestyles we can still observe. And they reshape the old theory: long life wasn't a modern anomaly. prehistoric longevity was real for those who survived childhood, but many still died young. Why? The answer comes from real-world anthropological data, not theory. A meta-analysis of traditional hunter-gatherer groups found the leading causes of death. 70% died of natural diseases, infections, parasites, malaria, diarrhea, pneumonia, diseases we can easily treat today, but which were nearly fatal in prehistory. 20% died from accidents or violence, falling from trees, animal attacks, group conflict, all could be instantly fatal. Only 9% died of old age, meaning they surpassed all other risks and reached their biological limit. The takeaway: most people didn't die of aging. They died before they could grow old. But one key factor stood out: isolation and community size. In small nomadic groups, many modern infectious diseases didn't exist. No flu, no measles, no smallpox, no tuberculosis. Why? Because viruses and bacteria need a large host population to sustain transmission. In small, constantly moving groups, there weren't enough hosts to support epidemics. The kinds of diseases that once wiped out entire cities in modern history simply couldn't emerge among ancient hunter-gatherers. Conclusion: the environment mattered immensely. If someone survived infancy, avoided acute infections, and lived in a small community without large-scale disease, prehistoric humans absolutely had the potential for long lives. They weren't immortal, but they weren't doomed to early death either. In a world without books, maps, or data storage systems, human memory was the only means to transmit knowledge. And those who held that memory were the elders. Though they no longer hunted or carried heavy weapons or built shelters, they possessed something no one else did: experience accumulated over decades, knowledge not written down but lived through. In the Arctic, the Inuit do not navigate by GPS. They predict wind direction through subtle shifts in animal fur. They know which ice will break and when, not because of books, but because elders have seen it happen across generations. Elders are living maps guiding survival across icy deserts. In the Amazon rainforest, the Shipibo people have no hospitals. When someone falls ill, they go to the elders, those who know which leaves reduce fever, which barks cure diarrhea, which roots ensure safe childbirth. These remedies were never written down, but they were remembered, passed on through speech, ritual, and practice. In the lands of the Yolngu people in Australia, there are no courts. When conflict arises, the community gathers a council of elders, those who know the ancient laws not through training, but because they have lived by them all their lives. Justice, here, is not written on paper, but engraved in collective memory. Elders are not just witnesses of the past, they are tools for survival. They hold the maps, seasonal calendars, medical knowledge, social codes, marriage rules, and sacred rituals, everything that forms culture and safeguards community. They were not sidelined, they were the center of knowledge, the irreplaceable mental structure of society. It wasn't stone tools or fire that helped humans endure through thousands of harsh seasons. It was living memory, embodied in an old person sitting by the fire, recounting stories the young had never lived through. The care of elders is strong evidence that compassion existed early in human history. But sometimes, even compassion had to give way to survival. In extreme conditions, prolonged cold, food shortages, failed hunts, keeping one person alive who could no longer move or feed themselves could mean death for the whole group. From this reality came a behavior, rare but documented across several cultures: geronticide, the death of the elderly, not through violence, but through voluntary withdrawal. In Inuit traditions, oral stories passed down for generations tell of such times. When winter grew too long and food was only enough for the young, the elders quietly left their tents at night, walking into the white snow. No farewells, no noise, They understood, if they stayed, everyone might die. If they left, the others might survive. Similar behaviors were documented in parts of Africa and Australia, where elders chose to fast or walk alone into the forest during times of famine. Not because they were abandoned, not because they were forced out. They chose to go when they realized their presence could reduce others' chances of survival. This wasn't a tragic ending. It was a conscious act of sacrifice, a sign that even in prehistory, humans could place the survival of the group above individual life. And that capacity for empathy and altruism is something no other animal species has demonstrated at such a level. In the dry highlands of Dmanisi, present-day Georgia, archaeologists uncovered one of the most debated discoveries in human history, a Homo erectus skull, dated to about 1.8 million years ago. This individual had no molars, no canines, no incisors. The entire natural chewing system was gone, yet the jawbone showed complete healing where the teeth once were, clear evidence that this person lived for years after losing the ability to chew food. The question is simple but profound. How did a Homo erectus, unable to chew or process raw food, survive in the wild? The answer is almost universally agreed upon. Someone took care of him, perhaps a family member, perhaps the whole group. They cooked, mashed, or softened his food and fed him daily, long enough for bone resorption to occur. There were no ceramics, no medical tools, no knowledge of nutrition, but there was something deeply human, intentional care for someone who could no longer survive on their own. This finding rewrites many assumptions about Homo erectus, once thought to rely only on instinct for survival. In reality, even without a Homo sapien-sized brain, they demonstrated the essential quality of humanity, recognizing the value of an individual, even when that individual could no longer contribute physically. No writing, no spoken language as we know it. But that act, feeding an elderly toothless man, is the earliest known evidence of compassion in human evolution. It isn't just archaeology. It's the first story of human care. In a deep cave in the Zagros Mountains of Iraq, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a Neanderthal about 45,000 years old, known as Shanidar I. Bone analysis revealed a severe injury record, a poorly healed leg fracture, a deformed knee, blindness in one eye, deafness in one ear, and the loss of use in one arm. He couldn't hunt. He couldn't walk normally. He couldn't care for himself. And yet, he lived to about 45 to 50 years old, a high age in prehistory. This could only have happened if someone had helped him, daily for years. Someone shared food. Someone kept him warm during cold seasons. Someone protected him from predators and conflict. Not out of utility, not from obligation, simply because no one wanted to leave him behind. This wasn't an isolated case. In France, remains of another Neanderthal showed nearly total molar loss and severe arthritis in the spine and knees. He too lived to middle age. Both cases point to the same reality. Neanderthals had a significant system of social care, far beyond pure survival instinct. They didn't abandon the sick or disabled. They kept individuals alive even when they could no longer contribute labor. Not for gain, but through a form of social bond once thought unique to Homo sapiens. These discoveries force us to rethink Neanderthals. They weren't club-wielding brutes. They had community structure, emotional ties, and the ability to care for the vulnerable. This isn't speculation, it's data, recorded in bones that once lived and fractures that once healed. In a rock shelter in France, archaeologists found the remains of an ancient Homo sapiens named Cro-Magnon I, dating back about 30,000 years. His skeleton showed a benign tumor growing at the bone's end, facial deformities, severe arthritis in limbs and spine. His health was clearly deteriorating, yet he lived to about 50 years old, a remarkable age for that time. More importantly, he did not die alone. He was not abandoned. He was buried. Beside his body, scientists found refined stone tools, symbolic objects, beads, and amulets made from bone or ivory. No signs of haste, no signs of hiding or neglect. On the contrary, the burial reflected respect and possibly ritual. Cro-Magnon 1 was not unique. Many other elderly Homo sapiens remains, often with chronic illnesses, were found in tombs containing grave goods. Each shows that their communities recognized spiritual value beyond physical productivity. As humans transitioned to settled life, farming, herding, building villages, the elders' role did not diminish. They no longer hunted or carried loads, but they became cultural and intellectual pillars. They were the storytellers, the ritual guides, the keepers of tradition and morality. In Homo sapiens society, old age wasn't merely tolerated, it was recognized as meaningful. Archaeological evidence is clear. Dying of old age was not a forgotten end. It was a process prepared for, recorded, and honored. Homo sapiens are not the fastest species. We have no claws like leopards, no muscles like great apes, no numbers like insects. Biologically, we are not dominant. But one trait helped humans not just survive, but thrive: the ability to hold on to one another, in situations where most animals would let go. Our ancestors survived not because everyone was strong, but because even the weak were kept close. Feverish children weren't left behind. Toothless elders weren't left to starve. The disabled weren't cast out of the tent. Actions that seem small, feeding a toothless elder, sharing meat with a lame man, keeping a sick child warm, were the foundations of what we now call society. Fire, tools, and language were vital. But what truly set us apart was not in our hands or brains. It was in a conscious decision to not leave anyone behind. And if we are still here today, it is not because every individual was strong, but because we knew how to walk forward together. In a world shaped by natural selection, caring for the weak is illogical, but it became the foundation of human social evolution. That is not philosophy, that is data. And that is why, ultimately, we became human.